Chantal inspires for her professional career in product management. Although she initially studied architecture, today she will explain us how she started her career in the tech world, how was the adventure of entrepreneurship, and what are the keys to work for companies like Amazon, Meta, Credit Karma, eBay, or Microsoft. I am especially excited to do this interview today because I met Chantal at university. I think you will be fascinated to see how her career has evolved.
Welcome to She Has a Voice podcast, stories about women of strength and their journey in tech.
Hello, Chantal. Thanks a lot.
Same. Pleasure to be here. This is great.
So, Chantal, you are an expert in product management. What does it mean being a product manager? How would you explain your children what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, and I get it. A lot of people ask about, what is product management? And I remember at the beginning of my career, a lot of people say that, a product manager is the CEO of a product, right? And I think a lot of the people who started in product management at least 10 years ago when I started, were going into that because they wanted to be kind of the CEO, right? And they felt like they could make all the decisions, but I didn't have to pay the paycheck. So I was just doing the shiny thing. And everybody was thinking about, I think, Steve Jobs, right? And like the idea of like, okay, he's the product manager of the, iPhone and all the things. For me, my definition, obviously, based on my experience, has changed. I think that a product manager is somebody who is the champion of the customer. I think that that's one of the things that I have learned from my experience is that building products based on competitors, building products based on things that you want to do, that is, to me, not good product management, right? So I think that when you think about product management, I think that there is ways to build products and there's better ways to build products, right? I don't want to say bad either. And I think that in terms of better ways, to me, when I think about better ways, I think a better way for me is someone who listens to a customer, somebody who is data driven. So looks at the customer voice, but also is able to abstract that and think about, okay, what is the total addressable market? How many of this kind of user do we have? So it doesn't just like create a product for one person, but just thinks about also the opportunity holistically. Somebody who's able to influence, right? I think one of the hardest jobs as a product manager is that you don't really get to do always what you want. You need to convince others. And as a product manager at the beginning of your career, when you're not a leader where you have reports, right, and you can kind of like give more guidance, it's more using influence. And I think that influence is a super skill. So I think a product manager is able to like bring people along in their thinking, in the journey, in the journey of the process and the product, and by influence. I like to think about archetypes, right? When I think about product manager, and I think that there's one that is very, for example, entrepreneurial. So I've experienced and I've worked with product managers that are really good at 0 to 1 thinking. So I think that for those, I think that once they develop, they know how to do the product specs, listen to the customer, make decisions based on data, are able to work with engineers and influence people. I think that then the next level is to think about the other archetype. I think could be somebody who's very technical, right? Some people are extremely good at machine learning, very AI driven. So they're able to like think about models and like really abstract a lot of data and complex engineering products, right? And then finally, I think there's a third type of PM, TPM, or somebody who's more really good at processes and really scaling projects, right? So think about either expansion of something.
Do you try to have these 3 different types of product managers in your teams?
I do think that diversity is really important in your teams, but I do think that more than having one of each, I think it's very important to know what is it that you're trying to accomplish in the role and to tailor those, have the right type of talent for those type of roles. So the most important thing is that a PM skill set, and to the point I was making, right? The tendency that they keep having is aligned with the job, right? So, and I think that the biggest shame that we have in the work market right now is there's not a good match usually in terms of like the talent and the job, because there's reorgs and things like that, and people end up naturally in places that don't enjoy. And so people who don't enjoy doing work and they're not talented, or they're not the most talented people to do that job, that combination then impacts the product, right? In a negative way, ultimately.
Chantal, one question, because when we met at the university, we were both studying telecommunications engineering, but actually you studied architecture, right? In France, if I remember correctly. So why did you decide to study architecture in first place? And then why did you decide to move to engineering?
When I started architecture, I think it's the first sign, and I was really young to realize that I was a 0 to 1 kind of person. For me, an architect is somebody who's able to, like, in an AutoCAD, kind of like map into a wide canvas. They're able to like think about outside of the box and conceive something from scratch. And that was really appealing. I also have been always very attracted to arts and creativity. And I didn't see myself going to business school because I felt like that was something I could learn later on, versus I feel like developing your creativity and exploring how to do 0 to 1 is something a lot harder, really important towards becoming a product manager.
I also read that actually you went through entrepreneurship and that you founded consultancy company head first, if I remember correctly. How was this experience for you?
Yeah, so I think the first startup that I kind of got involved was called Let's App. It was in Madrid when I was living there. And I realized that it was actually really hard to make a startup successful. It's not just the product, right? Like what is the marketing? What is the go-to-market? What is the right time of you know what I mean? Like there's so many other factors. So I think that experience was kind of like the stepping stone for me to build my own consultancy. When I started Headfirst, what happened is I had a lot of people who came from MBAs or masters in economics or things like that who reach out to me being like, oh, you are doing a master in computer science. Can you build my app? So a lot of people reach out to me with like, I have this idea, Chantal, you just need to code it, right? Because I was doing my master's. And literally every week somebody would come to me. And so what I would do is I'd be like, well, I only have so much capacity. I need to choose well. So I would sit down with those people. And then I quickly realized that I had a lot of questions that I had not thought about. But in a lot of cases, kind of like that idea I would question some core things. And I did realize that there was not really like an assessment for people who are thinking about an idea to vet a little bit the idea, maximize the success of that idea, I would say. So, 99% of startups fail, 99%. So when you think about that number, can we reduce it to 97% or something? That was my whole, and so we created this assessment week where we look at several dimensions of a product, right? So we like took over the database, we took over like the onboarding, all the data, we mapped all of that, and we're able to do product assessment. And based on that, we will give a rating at the end of the week. And we'll be like, based on our assessment, we think that you guys are really close, right? Or like we think there are 2 or 3 pain points in this product. It could be on the onboarding flow. Either we thought there's something we could do. If the rating would be 2 over 10 or 3 over 10, that would kind of mean that, we'd recommend you to stop this for now. And then we had 3 to 6 month implementations where we put like a product manager, engineer, a designer, a data into the startup, and they would implement. So we would say, for example, we think the pricing is off of this, and this is why you're not getting enough traction of this. So I would say probably like out of 50 startups, I think we put like 15 through implementation phase.
Okay. Yeah. And I find this kind of like product assessment really important because somehow when you're working on a product, you fell in love with your product. It's very difficult to bring this perspective from outside and to think like, okay, maybe my product is not ready or it's not good enough or the customers are not looking for my product. So to make this decision, also maybe sometimes inside the companies, because then there are politics that are playing also a role there. So not an easy task.
Absolutely. I think that product managers, the job on paper and the reality, especially in bigger companies, is very different, right? Mm-hmm. And I from my experience in startups, both doing my, 2 startups. And I think the more mature you go, the more product management becomes. I think there's so many more factors to take into account.
And then you landed to big companies in Silicon Valley. So how was it?
So during my master's, I did an internship at eBay just to see how it was, right? Because I had done only startups. I did know what I didn't want to do. I did not want to do consultancy. And when I went to eBay, I think it was a very interesting experience. I think it taught me that one thing that I didn't know before is that collaboration is probably one of the most important skills in big companies. Learning how to work with others and making sure your collaboration is really healthy. In smaller startups, I think people tend to talk to each other more, I wouldn't say aggressively, sharply, but be like, this doesn't make sense. But in bigger tech companies, the way people talk to each other, sometimes people don't say what they mean, or it's really this or another, you know what I mean? It's gone through so many more filters, I think. And I think it taught me that I had to work on certain things that I had not had to work on before. And then also I think another thing that I realized is that in big tech companies, it's product management seems a lot smaller. So for example, when I was working at startups, like I would own the entire product, literally end to end, from software to hardware, whatever, but in big tech companies, it felt like the scope was, oh, you're responsible for this part of this thing, this thing, right? And I was like, that's it? Like, so I did realize that building at scale comes with a lot more complexity, both in the collaboration aspect and then on the processes aspect and the timelines aspect.
So I really like, Chantal, that you share in LinkedIn tips and you share also what you're learning. I feel this very inspiring and good because at the end, we are all facing similar issues, right? But how is it for you receiving feedback from colleagues or maybe from people who doesn't know you?
Let's just start by saying it's very hard to get a good manager, right? Very hard. And so for me, when I had my first managers, I was like, I wouldn't understand. And every single time something happened that I would disagree with or I wouldn't be at ease, I would be like, how would I want that person to react to me, So that kind of like created that kind of like, I think, foundation to the point where one day I thought, I think I can do better than this, and I think it came naturally to me, during my time at Amazon at Twitch. I think it's like, I was just starting to coach people. Like, I felt like it was a natural thing for me. Like people would, I think, turn themselves to me for advice or things like that. And I ended up being like unofficially, right, kind of like having some people that were reporting to me. So I think that was kind of like how I think things naturally came for me. And for me, it was all about building my management skills on top of that. I think the first thing, foremost, is empathy. I think being an empathetic leader means that I care about my people. Because for me, it's very hard to care about the product, but not care the people who do the product. So to me, it's like a circle, right, of life. Like if you take care of the people take care of the product. So for me, I do think that empathy is very important and not just fake it, but really I clearly care. So that's one trait that I didn't notice in a lot of my leaders. And so the other one is expectations. I think that one thing people confuse sometimes is like, oh, you're a nice person, so I can do whatever I want with Chantal or whatever because she's super nice. But I do think that the second one is super important. I think expectations is as important as being empathetic and a kind person, because you need to still product manage your product managers, right? You need to have KPIs. What are the goals that I have for, what are your goals? How are you going to get there? How are we going to measure success, right? So I think that it's very important to be really, 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 really transparent, right? And I think the third one is empowerment. I think it's very important to help your PMs grow. I think it is almost your job as a PM to help your product manager up-level your PMs. My job is not to tell you how to do your job or monitor your job. My job is that you become me one day, that you're able to do my job, or like that you're able, that you're growing where direction you're trying to grow. And so I don't see my PMs as, reach out to me to every review. I'd be like, I'll be here for you, right? Tell me what you need from me. But my goal is to have you grow into your best version. My job is not to press everything out of you and get the most amount of work out of you and try to make you do whatever I don't want to do, and then take the credit from the work that you do, For me, my end goal, and I always say that, is that my PMs like present products that are awesome, and I don't want to see my name anywhere. I just want them to take literally all the light. Because I think that's, I see myself a little bit like as a producer of a movie, like let the actors, at the end of the day, I coach the actors to get to the performing the movie. But I think that a lot of people go into management with I don't see myself as successful until my reports are successful at their work.
But I think that this is the new way of leadership and the old way, right? So old way, it would be like, I am a leader because you're doing like all this stuff and I am presenting in front of everyone to say how good I am. And then new way, it would be that you're empowering your team. They are taking credit of what they are doing and you're supporting them and you're building this team.
I do think that there's an all anyway, but I also do think that, let me tell you some examples. I think that their leaders sometimes are concerned that some of their reports may be better than them or something, or more capable. they're afraid. And so they push those people down. Like some people go into leadership positions out of luck, or I wouldn't say even luck. I think like just maybe they fall into that position and they may not be the best equipped person to be in that position, but they like the prestige or whatever that comes with it. And instead of leading, they're just managing the situation to stay there, right? And so I don't too much adhere into this old and new way, because I do think that there's maybe more self-awareness. I think coaching is more accepted in our society these days, and more open to growth and things like that. But I do think that there's still, in the new ways, there's still a ton of management and people who are in management that should not be.
What advice would you give someone that would like to start in the product management world?
I think that the biggest advice is, and it's kind of like what I did as well, is like create product, like either advice, like early in your career, especially if you're young, right, and you have no other experience under your belt, it would be difficult to get credit. So like get an opportunity. So I think that the best is to put yourself out there. One thing I would recommend is, if you are somebody who's interested more in design, or you have interest in, I created my own Dribble account. Actually, I can link it afterwards, whatever. I had my Dribble account, created lots of designs. I got really interested in Photoshop and in all the tools. And I considered for a long time being a designer while I was in architecture school. And, once I started doing designs, I would like think about ideas. I would mock them. They would share them on my LinkedIn, right? I would share with people I know. And I think that a lot of that also created a lot of network and, opportunities later on, right? So I think that's one. Another one, I think, is if you go to school, right? If you do a boot camp on computer science, or you go do a master's or an MBA or whatever, try to create some sort of like product or something like that you can try to validate, right? You can always test it out, right? You know what I mean? You can always figure out ways to do product management without, you can always go to a weekend. Startup weekend is something I also did early on in my career. So there are ways to start. If you're passionate, you'll find a way. I think that another thing about product management that I get asked a lot is, how do you climb the ladder? How did you become a manager? How do you know managing for teams on Instagram? And I think it's like, I didn't have coaching, you just figure out a way because you want to get there, right? And you're smart. And people who get there don't usually, they just figure it out, right? That's why you can do the job, because you have figured it out.
You're a doer, right? Instead of living in the ideas world.
First and foremost, you need to have a goal, right? And once you have a goal, then you can create different strategies to get to your goal. And each strategy will depend on your exact situation, right? And to your point, like design, you start with Dribble. Maybe you're in a master in computer science, you start collaborating on a project with an MBA. So I think that how to get into product management highly depends on where you are at.
So you studied in Europe, but then you moved to US. What would be the thing that you would take from Silicon Valley, from these big tech companies, that you would bring to Europe?
I think that I have learned the most in the US, and that I don't miss about Europe, is that the communication is very direct. In Spanish, in French, or even in Swedish, it's like very proper, right? In English, it's very much like, here's the email, attach the picture, see you. And that's very acceptable in the business world and helps you achieve. There's no accents in the language, like in Spanish or in French or in Swedish. So I think that the way Americans communicate shocked me at first in a very positive way. How practical they were. Another thing I would say is the culture is extremely very solution driven and not very complaint driven. For example, it's very common in Spain or in France or in Sweden, like to sit down and be like, let's have a coffee break or whatever, right? And let's talk with friends. In US, people grab coffee and they're in the car on the go, right? Like people don't really sit down for coffee. I think the conversations in general are more practical in the US, and they're like more like towards a goal. Europeans tend to spend more time thinking. Like I talked all the time to my friends in Europe, my family, and it's always like this and that of all the politics. And now 10 years after being in the US, I am like, why are you spending time thinking about that? Like you can't do anything about it. Are you friends with the president? Like you can't do anything about it. Don't spend any brain power. So I think Americans are really, really efficient. The same thing, they're very practical, very efficient with their brain power. They're like, I'm not going to worry about things I should not be worrying about. So it's something that actually my husband, I think, trained me so much on as well. He was like, I would be like, oh my, but this is happening right now in like this country. And he would be like, oh, that sucks. It's very bad. That said, do you have any way to contribute to the problem? Like, are you going to send money? Like, what are you going to do? And I would be like, no, I just want to talk about it. It really is concerning to me. And he would be like, okay. Like they're just not, like, don't waste energy alive. Like, go play golf, do something productive, something's going to bring joy and happiness. So I think this is the second point. And the third point is the thing that I was just mentioning. People are very happy people in general in the US. They're very upbeat. Like, how are you doing? Great. Like, I think most people, like, they are trying to be positive, and it doesn't mean that they don't have deeper issues and everybody has problems, but in general the attitude is very positive. Like, you pick up the phone anywhere you talk, right, to a customer service, to any store, anyone, you're like, hey. And I've noticed in other countries people are like, could be more down, or like they don't pick up the phone or respond. These are really responsive and working well, and I don't have ever a bad experience.
Chantal, something that I admire about you is that you're very active in LinkedIn. You're sharing everything what you're learning, and also you have a great career in product management, and on top of that, you're a mom. So how do you manage everything?
I don't have a secret to this, to be honest. I don't think there's a secret recipe. I do think, though, that I've learned along the way certain tips. The first thing that I have learned is that it's really hard as a woman to plan your children around your career. I've always thought, oh, I'm gonna, get pregnant in a time where I have been some time in my job, and when the economy is good, my husband and I are good, and I feel like nothing ever ends up lining up. My first pregnancy, I was working at Credit Karma, and I was like 4 months pregnant. I had this opportunity come in from Adobe. It was a dream company for me that I had been wanting to work at, and I think like 5 months or 6 months pregnant, I ended up going there. I've done pregnancy the second time after 2 years at Amazon. I think that my recommendation in general is like never going to be the best time to start a family. That said, if you can be in a job that you feel comfortable and stable, is definitely easier, because when you come back, if it's a job you should just have not been enough time, it's really hard to ramp up. I do think that as a woman, I've seen women start maternity leave literally starting a job. I've seen people 6 months into the job or a year into the job. So I do think that in general it's more recommendable to be in a job, to be delivering some valuable trust, than just starting. I think a lot of times we women say we want to have equal rights and all that, but then at the end of the day, you don't plan it, right? Like this way. And then being a mom, then, so that part, I think the pregnancy, something surprised me very much as a mom in tech, is how hard it is. Pregnancy is tough in general, unless you have it. Look, there's 10% of women have like easy pregnancy, so yeah, for those. But for those of us that usually have nausea in the first trimester, so you have 3 months really tough. The second trimester is usually the better one. And the last trimester, you can barely sit down, so think about commuting, being tired. I think that it does take a toll on your performance. So when you work in like super high performing cultures that are used to you at this level, and they're really performance driven, it's extremely exhausting, because you feel like you're constantly either, you're not feeling well, but you have to perform at the level you were performing for, and your brain is going somewhere else as well, because you think you have the baby kick or whatever, and you're like not there. I think that it's really tough to be a working mom, especially if you are in higher up positions. A lot of people ask me as well, like, do you think it's better they climb the ladder and have babies, or is it better to have babies early? I think that it's a little bit harder when you are in higher positions to be pregnant, because you're like, it's harder for people to take on your responsibility when you're out. You leave a big void of leadership, versus if you are an individual contributor, your manager will take on the work. For example, my time at Instagram, at Meta, I had 2 of my reports on maternity leave, and I pick up their work. I just took all the work, right? It was super hard, and it was struggle, right? I think, but at the end of the day, I felt like it was more feasible than me, who was managing like the whole thing, to be out. So
thanks for sharing. I think it's difficult to find women to speak about these things and being so transparent. So thanks a lot. What do you think that could be done so that more women are, happy or positive about going to leadership positions, to encourage them?
Like, for me, in terms of like my motivation to be in leadership positions has always been like, I want to be one of the leaders I didn't have, right? And so if I don't see any at the top, especially that represent me as a woman, I want to be able to lead by example. I do want to show the world that it's possible. So that motivation has been fire for me. Like I want to show the world that actually you can be a woman and you can actually make good decisions and be there and lead the way I believe my leading exactly. And that's one. I think that the other one is the motivation is like, one day when you're a mom of a kid, you want to tell them follow your dreams, right? And you don't want to say, if you have a little girl, follow your dreams, but when you get pregnant, stop following them, right? Like, so to me, I see my job as a mom super important. I love my children more than anything, but I also know that I cannot be home all day long with my children, because I am the best mom when I see them 3 or 4 hours a day and at lunchtime, like I give them the best quality time because my brain I've been talking with adults. I've been able to think about the things than just diapers and food and do that every day on repeat, right? For me, that's how I learn my style, right? And every mom is different. So I think that's very important to know who you are and know that if you decide to grow your career, you're going to have to make hard compromises. Like I think the most important thing is that you align your heart with your brain and you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. For me, my modus operandi, the way I thought about this is like, if I'm going to be away from my kids 8 hours a day, it better be for a job that matters. That's why I've always optimized, especially since I had children, for being in a job that I feel like I'm learning, that I'm growing, that it's not toxic, and that I feel like it's the right place for me.
May I ask how many hours do you work per week?
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly, it's a really tough one. I think over the past 4 years, I think I've been working like pretty intense weeks, to be honest. It's hard to count them because the intensity per minute is really intense in these big tech companies. So I probably would say between 60 and 80 hours a week, easily. Things I love about Europe is people do take more time to live life. Here it's almost like I need a day off, so a lot of people take the Fridays off or a Thursday and Friday off, and that's called a vacation, like it's a long weekend.
Yeah. And I think that this is something that in general women struggle to ask what we want and to set up the expectations, because otherwise you're taking everything on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think that as women, it's funny, but I have also perceived this a lot. You either have the very assertive woman who people are like, they're like very aggressive, right? So we're either called very aggressive because we're like, you have to do this by then, or you're just not able to drive results or like the thing. So I think that striving for the balance is extremely hard. Because the stereotype of like women have to be, like the caring, like a mom that yells at a kid, don't do that with a stern voice, is perceived as an angry mom. But if my husband, for example, says to my kids, don't do that, oh my God, what a great man. He's powerful. He's like, do you know what I mean? So it's funny how even like I've observed as a mother that the perception of society of even how we talk to our children is like, oh, like she's in a bad mood, right? So if I tell my kids, don't touch this in the supermarket because you're going to break the glass, I can see people looking at me like, oh my God, she's like very, she must be really having a bad day, versus my husband does that. I'm like, oh, that's so sexy, he's a dad. He's such a great dad, So it takes so little for a man to be a great dad. It takes so little for a mom to be a bad mom.
So Chantal, maybe let's go for the final questions. What is your passion?
Ultimate passion is to help people. I think that has been always my passion. And the way I like to think about helping people is, you can either help on a one-on-one basis, like coaching or being a doctor, something like that, or you can help them with solutions. And this is how I got into product. And I think this is how I think about how I coach my PMs, how I grow my teams, right? I think about how do I get the most bucks, kind of a bucks for my time, like how much money for my time. I mean, like how do I invest the best? So, and then I think about helping my PMs get better at whatever they're trying to get to, right? And like seeing their evolution, helping my kids be good human beings, right? And like be good for society.
And then what is success for you?
I think success is a couple of things. For help, right? You need to have some KPIs, right? As I said on product management, so I have mine. I think for me, when I hear, my reports, for example, say, oh, Chantal, you were the best manager, the best leader I've ever worked with, I will follow you to whatever company you work with, or I will love to work with you again in the future. This is success to me. Success for me as well to see my reports become good at things that they could become good at.
A goal that you're working for, like mid, long term.
Is really trying to figure out like how to best balance this equation of my passion, the impact I want to do, but also really pay attention to my family. I think that when you have young children, going after your passion blindly and like taking on opportunities that are really exciting to you as you with our children is very like, it calls you, right? You sometimes really, the kind of opportunity, but it's really about making the right choices, right? In life, like the right balance in my life where I'm not on edge at home. Like I'm just not working until burnout. I'm spending time with my children, you know, I'm striving for that balance in that phase of my life, and thinking makes you do choices that you optimize for something specific, but you don't see the whole picture. And I think that when I got to that place where I wanted to be my goal, I did realize that I had forgotten to enjoy the path sometimes. And I just wish I would have enjoyed a little bit more and just spend more time with friends. And like, do you know what I mean? Because like now I have all my friends and we spend a lot of time together, but sometimes like, I wish I would have learned that you have to enjoy. It's not just getting to the goal, it's also enjoying your way to the goal.
Is this the advice that you would give to the Chantal when you were a child?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that I have a couple of advices that I would give myself. One would be just don't optimize for title or money or name of a company. Optimize for the long term. Those things will come. Optimize for being really good at something, right? Either it's industry related, or if it's growth, if it's 0 to 1, optimize for something. Just think about the career as a long path. And I think the other one is not only long path, you think about it, but also holistically. Is to host you for the next 30 years. So you need to take care of your body. You need to take care of your health. You need to take care of your friendships, of your family. Take the time for those things. Those things matter.
And final question. A name of a woman who inspires you or who inspired you in the past.
One woman that really inspired me in the past was Marisa Mayer at the beginning. She had 4 kids and she got to be, the CEO of Yahoo. And I think that it was really inspiring to first ever see a woman in tech, especially growing up right here in the Bay Area. Seeing her being able to do it all seemed like, right? And so I thought it was really inspiring. You see a lot of people in Silicon Valley, they're all career driven and incredibly successful women. But then when you dig into it, like they don't have the breadth, right? The holistic thing that I was talking. You see them doing IVF at 42 years old, trying to have the first child, and like they realize they want to have 4 kids, or you don't see the whole picture, right? And then the other end, you see women who are not ever making it to the top, which is okay, by the way, but that have sometimes very great, other balance. And so I think that success is very important that you define what success is to you, because I think everything is okay. Like,
so thanks a lot, Chantal.
Yeah, same. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this interview and that you learned so much as I did. So important to have role models like Chantal who are so transparent about what means being a mom and working in a high position. If you like this episode, it would be great if you could support me by subscribing to the podcast and giving me a like. Thanks again and see you next week. Ciao!